My name's Peter Smith. I'm Professor of Social Statistics at the University of Southampton, and I suppose my research interests have been in developing methodology to handle complex survey data, to model complex survey data with particular applications in the social sciences, demography, and health sciences. And I'm pretty new to looking at administrative data, and I think why I was asked or nominated to become director of the Administrative Data Research Centre for England, one thing was I'm a statistician with background in analysing complex data. I also directed the Southampton Statistical Sciences Research Institute for 3.5 years, and that brought together statisticians, demographers, actuarial scientists working across the area. So maybe some of my expertise is in directing research. And as you will hear today, it's already been mentioned, there is a wide range of expertise both within, as I'll say in a moment, the Administrative Data Centre for England, but also across the network. So I've been asked to perhaps talk about administrative data, and I'm going to, Melanie has covered lots of things, and I think I'm going to drill down in a number of things that she's introduced you to. And the aim was to introduce people who know less than me about administrative data. And there are people in the audience who know more, and they can perhaps answer some of the questions. So what I'm going to talk about is a definition which I've taken from the service's website of what administrative data are. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit and give you some ideas of the administrative data sources, coming from the assumption that you know not much about them. What is administrative data research? And I'm going to pull out, it's basically what has been, the topics have been, there's been some research in the past, there will be some research done as part of the network, and new applications will also cover these research. And I've basically pulled out a lot of the stuff from the English bid into that, but from discussions across the network, it's the sort of issues that need to be addressed, both methodological and a few policy. I'm then going to give you, in fact, what were the objectives. The ESRC set some objectives for the Administrative Data Research Centres, so I will tell you about that. And the challenge of doing this presentation is I've been asked to talk about all the centres, and I know particularly England, but of course we were all responding to the same bid with the same objectives. So in some senses we do meet those objectives, so it's worth knowing what those objectives were and a little about how they've evolved over the last year while we've been working together. Then I'm going to concentrate and just fill in some more details about the structures in England, which I know quite well. I've got some slides from colleagues from Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, so I will present those that fill in a little details. The Northern Ireland Wales will be relatively easy because there's nobody to correct me, but Scotland, Chris Dibben is here, so he may be pointing out where I've misrepresented him. And maybe we can assess the amount of misrepresentation from Scotland. We'll be able to impute the amount of misrepresentation from Northern Ireland and Wales, but we'll see how we get on. So, what are administrative data? So, administrative data, as Melanie have said, but this is the definition on the ADRM website, and there's the web address again. Information collected primarily for administrative purposes, not for research. And so when we're working with them for research, we have to remember that they weren't collected for that purpose. So that's one of the challenges of looking at administrative data. It can be collected by national, local government, and other public sector organisations, and it's usually part of delivering a service. The Administrative Data Network at the moment is focusing on national government data. So the aim of the service is to provide access to de-identified national government data. The second phase covers some of the local government data. And so it's collected for registration, transaction, simple record keeping. So not only was it not given for research purpose, it wasn't collected with the aim of research. So this is a quote from Paul Boyle, who was involved in the Administrative Data Task Force report, which sums up the sort of the aim of what came out of the Administrative Data Research Task Force, Paul Boyle being the current chief executive of the ESRC. So routinely collected administrative data are a rich and largely untapped source of information for research and policy evaluation in the UK, the value of which continues to appreciate over time. So there are data there that are underused and probably becoming more valuable over time. Such data are often high quality, nationally comprehensive, provide information for long periods of people's lives, are relatively inexpensive to exploit. They're already being collected compared to the costs of commissioning surveys. So here is just filling in a little bit of details, and it introduces the complexity of the UK system, where some data is national, as in the UK national, and some data is country specific. So again, Melanie gave some ideas, but these are the sorts of data we aim to provide private access to. There's going to be negotiations with the data providers, but in theory, data held by central governments across the devolved governments as well as England and Wales are again for you to apply to have access, to have them linked to other data sources for analysis, as Melanie described. So you have tax record data from HMRC, for example, tax credit claimant data sets, benefit data, child benefit data set. Well, that was with the Department of Work and Pensions, but I now understand it's held by the HMRC. Sorry, there's a lot of acronyms in these, and some people only know the data sets by their acronyms, but I was trying to keep away from acronyms. Educational attainment is another area where there's a large amount of records on particularly in children in state schools about when they enroll, their ethnicity, gender, whether they're getting free school meals, their performance. But again, these are collected in the devolved governments, but there are the National Pupil Database for England and similar school censuses in Northern Ireland, Scotland, and in Wales. And then there is information about the university sector in the Higher Education Statistics Agency student record sets. So there's a large, and this is only a snapshot of a few of the data sets that are out there. There are health records. Again, they're broken down by the devolved governments. So we have the Hospital Episode Statistics data of England, Northern Ireland Hospitals and Statistics, the Scottish Mortality Database is a large number. But these are all information about getting involved with secondary care, so admissions and data on that sort of thing. And we have the primary care in the GP patient register database. And also, including this, we're including the official statistics, and again, the statistical agencies are heavily involved, as you'll see in a minute, with the ADRC, the Administrative Data Research Centres, as I will go through each of the countries. So there's mortality and death records, birth deaths, and I think we include the census in a part of administrative data. So again, what is the definition of administrative data research? Well, it's the use of these administrative data sets that come from central government, Office for National Statistics, or perhaps I should have said the statistical offices for the various devolved parts of the UK, including the Office for National Statistics, and also the census, and possibly linking that to survey data. So if there's some administrative data involved in the research, and I'll give you a few examples of work that has been done and is ongoing, where it's interesting to link administrative data to survey data. And the focus really of the administrative data research network is on the linked data. So it's gaining extra information by linking administrative data, either two administrative data sources together, or or three, or linking the administrative data source to some large surveys. We're covering both methodological and substantive, and methodological, and I'll say a few words about particularly the methodological development, but also the substantive. And I hope that there's ideas people have to undertake substantive research using linked administrative data. As Melanie has said, this sort of work has been going on, and some of the expertise from the teams that have been put together brings together people who've worked for a long time in these sorts of areas, but it's been rather ad hoc arrangements and a painful and time-consuming process to get hold of the data. So the idea of what the centres and the service are going to do is to take some of that pain away. It may not delay it. It may still take a while to get through the process, but to help and support researchers through that process. And over time, perhaps to build up relationships with the data providers to make that process quicker. And so that's what the aim of the ADRN is. So here's just a few sorts of things that the research. So as I said, they've been done in the past. Some of these are certainly planned to be undertaken by the Administrative Data Research Centre for England, but if you're looking to move into administrative data research, there's a wide range of topics. So there's some of the methodological topics. So just how do you maximize and ensure the high quality individual record linkage? So there's work on deterministic methods and probabilistic methods. So how to improve the linkage methods is one area of research at the individual. Another area is how do you link individual record data to spatial or temporal data. So there's areas to work in on that. So just the methodology for doing the data linkage is one area of research, ongoing research. Another area is looking at the assessing. So once the data has been linked, one is how can you assess the quality of that linked data set? Can you find gold standards perhaps to do some linkage and then have a gold standard to see how well the linkage is done? And acknowledging that there will be linkage errors, how can you take linkage errors into account when fitting statistical models? Similar processes we're perhaps more familiar with handling non-response and adjusting for non-response when you've got a survey data set to allow for non-response bias. How can you take into and maybe some inflation of standard errors to allow for errors, measurement error in the data? How do you do that with linked administrative data? So how can you handle that and provide realistic measures of uncertainty for your inferences? Another area that's ongoing is that, and will continue, is that you can use, if you believe that the administrative data is a more accurate source of data or provides information on people who haven't responded to your survey, you can use that information perhaps to help you, one, assess the quality of your survey, and also to identify whether there's non-response bias or measurement error bias in that. An example that's been going is the 2001 UK linked, UK in there twice, UK linked census, and linked in this twice, right? The UK census linked study. So that linked 5, I think, of the major surveys run by the ONS with the census of 2001 and provided a rich source of data. Clearly, there's the endless possibilities with policy-focused research. One thing is that you can evaluate interventions that maybe by looking back, because if you have historical administrative data going back in the past, you may discover that, oh, we've had a natural experiment here, but we didn't collect the data before the intervention. But if you've got the administrative data on these people, or possibly linked over time, you can go back and then do the analysis of the natural experiment. Clearly, you can use it for observational research, and you can start to link things together that maybe have never been done before. So maybe some environmental information from localities where people live with mortality data or with health data. And so you can look at observational research, looking at relationships between data sets that were perhaps never thought of being collected with the same data set. And similarly, you can look at studies of inequality and inequity by going back and looking at we have linking certain things like the access to care and seeing how that influences health outcomes or income outcomes. And a slightly different area, which I think a lot of the network is quite interested in, is the whole idea of the governance, legal, ethical and public policy aspects of linking and analysing government administrative data. So how should this process be governed? There are certain laws, and are they enough? And some people, I think, say, well, that's illegal to do that, so let's just do it. There's more discussion about, well, is that ethical? And how should we engage the public policy aspects of it? So that's just a snapshot of the sort of things that have been going on in administrative data research, that will continue to go on, and there's opportunity to get involved in them. So here was now returning to the administrative data research centres, here was the objectives set out in the original ESRC call, and so if you talk to any of the directors, they claim to meet these, although I'll say I think the third one has evolved over time. But so all the centres, and I will go through each centre in turn and say a little, but all the centres are setting up facilities or have facilities or modifying facilities. For example, Wales is building a new a new building to provide state-of-the-art access for researchers to de-identified administrative data by accredited researchers. And so there'll be on-site secure labs that people can visit. There will also, in time, be, as Melanie talked about, remote access to some of these sites. All of these centres have put in place, have data scientists and research fellows that are there to help the researcher, to help you as an external researcher through the process, from beginning of discussing perhaps the initial ideas that you have and the feasibility of these, all the way through to when you perhaps turn up at Southampton to do the analyses. The third one was there, but I think it's now clear that maybe that is curating rather than creating new linked administrative data. So we will certainly, as Melanie said, keep the code and the expertise to reconstruct data, but I think there's a move at the moment that most data will be created on a project-by-project basis and then destroyed when the project is over. But as things evolve, it may be that certain data sets can be created as a resource, a research resource. We all have in our programs, within the centres, research programs, and we've already started to meet to discuss these, to conduct original research using the linked data, both analytical, methodological, and substantive. There is, and this will be coordinated through the service, we're all committed to providing training and capacity building and public engagement. And the final thing that we were required to do, and we all are doing, is working within other elements of the administrative data research network to become a network. So what is the Administrative Data Research Centre for England? Well, that's led by the University of Southampton with 5 other members of the consortium. Usually, I'd better read this out because I often try and forget one. So University College London, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, the Institute for Physical Studies, the Institute for Education, and we're working with the Office for National Statistics. I'm the director. We have a team of deputy directors set across the consortium, Dave Martin in Southampton, Ruth Gilbert, who introduced herself at UCL, and Ben Hemberston at OS. And again, every centre was required to have a senior administrator or assistant director operations manager. Some of them are now in place, some of them are not, but at Southampton we have Emma White, who is a full-time person dealing with the non-academic side of the centre. So at Southampton we have secure laboratories that people can visit, both in Southampton, or will have once the infrastructure is in place, and in London for analysing the de-identified linked administrative data. So that's somewhere where, if the data providers feel that you need to have access only in a secure location and come in person to that, there will be the secure laboratories. With ONS as part of the consortium, we have access as part of the ADRCE to the virtual micro laboratory. We have, and we're setting up access to allow remote access to secure servers at Southampton. So if you have secure laboratories subject to approval, there may be opportunities to actually go to a local secure server, secure room, and log in. And so the data and the data processing will all take place at Southampton, but you'll be able to have remote access to that. As I said in the original brief for all centres, we've got staff to support researchers using the facilities. So we have what we call data scientists and research fellows who have slightly different job roles, but they're there to offer advice on the research and to support the setting up of the data cleaning, and to ensure that the process is as smooth as possible for the external researchers. We also in England have a team of academics to draw on to provide advice, so they'll be involved in the review process and possibly in the actual providing advice on projects where their expertise is needed. And we have expertise across education, finance, epidemiology, geospatial statistics, official statistics, government statistics. So a wide range of expertise. And also these academics will be involved in leading the research programs that relate to some of the themes that I mentioned earlier. And again, we will have a program of outreach training on the use of administrative data. now I need my notes a bit more because I've got to. So Northern Ireland is directed, as Melanie said, by Dermot O'Reilly. It's a partnership between NISRA, the Northern Ireland Statistical Research Agency, so that's their government research organisation, Queen's University Belfast and the University of Ulster. And they have split it up, so on the linkage, the safe settings, the data acquisition will be part of NISRA, whereas the academic side will be involved in, the academic institutions will be involved in the public engagement, training and capacity building, and the research. And the researcher support, which is, as I mentioned, the data scientists and research fellows will come from across the institutions. Their research, which ties in with the general research, I didn't put a slide for England about the research, but because I gave that as the more general research, but they're interested in certain things, record matching using uncertainty techniques, so that probabilistic methods, accuracy, and updating population registers. So it relates to my, again, ideas of improving linkage methods and assessing the accuracy. There's certain things that they feel in Northern Ireland that they're in a place to work on, which is social mobility, determinants of educational attainment. At the meeting last week, there was an argument or discussion who was most deprived area of the UK. So Dermot was claiming that there is some areas of deprivation in Northern Ireland that can be the focus of the research. Clearly, the legacy of the Troubles is something very specific to Northern Ireland, and equality assessment, I've talked a bit about that. And then there is some mixed methods, or mixed areas where there's going to be methodological and substantive research, so looking at migrant populations and their needs and uses of services. Scotland. Well, Scotland is, again, a consortium of universities, Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Heriot-Watt, St Andrews and Stirling, and they're going to be located in the EDCS for Scotland will be co-located in a single institute with the FAR Institute in a single building. I assume that's the building. In the Scottish Government and NHS will all be in the same building. They have particular expertise in admin data. I've got a few points on the next slide. Public engagement, linkage, law, relevant computer science techniques. Maybe that's something that's perhaps not so strong in England, is that you actually, in Scotland, if I understand it, there are academic computer scientists involved in the project. And as we said, it was directed by Chris Stibbin. So maybe just to pull out some of the areas of research, modes of access to administrative data, the law and public engagement, which I've talked a bit about. Well, one thing that perhaps is, again, unique to Scotland is the work that they want to do on linking historical data. And there are various issues about, again, it comes back to the law and the ethics about linking data from 50 years ago. And do you require the same consents and the same governance structures for those? And some quite interesting work that Chris has been doing, and if I've got time, I'll just show 3 slides on the work. And then I've got Wales to do. So it's generating synthetic data. So one way that I think England also saw this, and we've had some discussions about this, and Chris came down to a meeting at the Office for National Statistics about generating synthetic data, is that it takes a long time to get access to the administrative data. So if you have a synthetic data set that looks and behaves a bit like the data that you'll get in the end, you can develop your code in your own office, you can try some things out. If it's a reasonable, realistic representation of the data, you might be able to start to test some of the hypotheses. And then once you've got your code and you think it's worth the effort to go down to Southampton or to Scotland to analyse the data in the secure setting. So it may save time and also effort, and it may also stop some projects that are not viable because the information that people see in the data are not there. So there are various ongoing research projects on generating synthetic data. So Chris and his team have developed a little a suite of packages that implement this method of generating fully synthetic data. So there are various in the synthetic data area. There's partially synthetic and fully synthetic data. So partially synthetic data, the individuals are still, in some sense, in your data set with some of the original data still there. and some of the data is perturbed or adjusted to make it synthetic. Whereas synthetic data, you construct some model for the whole data set, and then you simulate from that data set. So it's usually a sequential method. So you get the original data. Is this going to work? Maybe it won't. Okay, so on the right-hand side, you have the original data. You fit a statistical model to that. You then draw a version of that, and you may do it sequentially. So you may regress y1 on y1 and y0 and y2 and y1 and y0, etc. And at the end, you can then draw a synthetic data set that in some ways you want to mirror the structures in the original data set. And again, there's some discussion about how close should that mirror the original data set. Should it, if it gets too close, then people will start to use it perhaps for actually policy work. But if it's not close enough, then it won't be so useful. So Chris has done some work with a package called SimPop. And so what this is just showing is how well it is working. So it's a package where you provide it with the original data. It will simulate the administrative data. And so these are just some indications that that it matches the marginal distributions really quite well. So we have marital status. So in the dark blue, that's the original data, and in the synthetic, and the light blue is the synthetic data. And so it's preserving, as you might expect, it's preserving marginal information. There's also, if you're going to use it perhaps to test out some hypotheses, be interested to see in some models how well it does. So here we have the estimate, the statistic, and some confidence intervals for the synthetic and the real data, and the conclusions are pretty similar across the various variables. So those that are not significantly different to 0 are the same for most of the synthetic and the real data. Okay, so returning just to finish off with Wales. So Wales, again, is a collaboration between Swansea and Cardiff, and has co-applicants from across Wales. It has a breadth of expertise in social and health sciences. It's got some unique data in some senses. I think that's on a later slide. So it's some ways there's ahead of the game with having a linked anonymized administrative data available. Its director is David Ford. Again, he's got associate directors there looking at data methods and data support, and they do have a project manager in place, John Smart. So again, there in fact, Wales is having their own building built for the data science, as they're calling it, which will include ADRCE. The building is being funded by the ESRC, the MSc, and the Welsh Government. They're developing new high security data lab with a node in Cardiff. They're again co-located like Scotland with the FAR Institute, the National Health Service, and the Welsh Government. So this is a new facility, so they're designing the security from the beginning. Again, they're interested, like all of us, in the privacy protection, information governance, and that's been built in from the beginning, and their aim is to share best practice. So they come with this experience of the SAIL data set, which I'll just... So it's already a linked data set, the Secure Anonymized Information Linked Data Bank. So there's already linked data from the National Health Service, births and deaths from ONS, educational attainment. And so they've already have a experience in supporting this type of work. And so they have experience of using multiple robust privacy protection methods. And Wales seems to be, from what I've heard, they're quite interested in a lot of trying to develop the automation of this, so that it's not humans that are doing much of the processing, although it's important to have humans in there. But they seem to have this idea of wanting to use technology to do at least help in the data checking and the statistical disclosure control, the statistical disclosure control. Okay, I think the final slide is, this is the vision that ESRC has for the Administrative Data Research Network. They want more consistent management of and access to routinely collected government administrative data. They want it to be a robust and trusted system. They want it to be a strong, and as you see, all the centres are collaborating with their national statistical agencies. So it's a strong academic and government research partnership. There's a lot about, and Melanie talked about it, about understanding the values of such research and improving public engagement. It's not just about substantive research, it's also about improving the methodological research and to provide training for the next generation of researchers using administrative data. And so we come to the better knowledge, better society.